This is the latest version of Keychron's popular low-profile mechanical 75% keyboard, the K3. This is version 3, but if you count the Pro and Max models, this is really the 5th iteration of this keyboard. It replaces the V2 and takes its place at the bottom of the K3 lineup, starting at just $84 for the white backlighting version. This is an affordable keyboard with a lot to love. However, in testing, I've got two major issues that we'll discuss: the new Keychron branded switches and the Bluetooth connectivity. The result is pretty disappointing for what I hoped would be an excellent next iteration of one of my favorite keyboards. If you want to make sure you avoid disappointment yourself, make sure you hit that subscribe button below so that you don't miss any future content. With that, let's jump right into build and design, which is pretty darn simple. If you've seen any of the K3 keyboards in the past, this is more of the same. The thin and light aluminum top case is ultra low profile and very sleek in its black appearance. On the bottom is ABS plastic and 2-stage adjustable feet, giving you typing angles at 2.5, 4.2, and 6.5 degrees. The case design is exactly the same as the K3 version 2 and the K3 Max. Sometimes I take it for granted because I've seen so many of these Keychron keyboards at this point, but these are incredibly thin boards. The low-profile switches are tiny but satisfying for mechanical keyboard lovers. There's next to no bezel around the outside, meaning that you've basically just got typing area and pretty much nothing else. It doesn't take up a lot of space on your desk, and it's very easy on the eyes. Even though it's not a new design, it remains very cool, and it's held up over time. What does change on this version are the keycaps, which change to the same size and shape as the Max version. The only differences from the Max are the color, which is a little darker on the V3, the material, which is ABS plastic rather than PBT, and the addition of shine-through for the white or RGB backlighting. The cheaper plastic means that these keycaps will smooth and shine more over time. To start, they feel slightly more textured than the Max, though that will inevitably change over time. Despite the lower quality keycaps, the fact that they are shine-through could be a standout feature for lovers of RGB out there. Outside of that, this is physically the same keyboard with the same key layout and similar though slightly different key printing and font. The typing experience has a lot more to talk about with the version 3. First, the V3 utilizes new Keychron branded low-profile switches rather than Gateron, which has long been a partner with Keychron. This could be a shift that Keychron makes across the board, or this may be a way that they look to save some money on their lower end models. I'm not really sure. Based on this single experience, I hope that they don't move fully over to these because I've had some issues. I'll dive fully into those, but first let's do a sound comparison between the Keychron brown switches on the K3 V3 and the Gateron brown switches on the K3 Max. The version 3 is very delicate and quiet, which I like. The sound is relatively consistent across the board. The spacebar is good, though slightly hollow sounding. Overall, I think that the board sounds nice. Part of the improvement is likely due to the new acoustic foams that Keychron has added, which make the board quiet and take a lot of the hollow feelings out that you could find in their previous versions, like the version 2. Despite the nice sound, typing feel isn't all positives for me. Typing feels stiff and a bit scratchy. It takes more force to press a key than I'd like, and the fact that the keycaps are a bit rougher, at least to start, makes them feel more grabby when typing and making it a bit challenging moving across the board. The result is a less than stellar experience. These results are also confusing. When comparing the Keychron switches to the Gatorons in the Macs, the Keychron version advertises less actuation force, meaning that typing should be easier and lighter. But in use, they feel significantly harder to press. It's not a deal breaker per se, but it feels odd when you're expecting them to be lighter, but they wind up feeling heavier. Maybe this was just something with my switches in particular, or with my board, but for me, it was definitely noticeable how much heavier these switches were. In my video covering the launch of this new keyboard, I wondered if the new Keychron switches were really just made by Gateron and would actually feel exactly the same. While they are certainly similar in design, I'd say they're definitely not identical. Side by side, they feel quite different. But okay, everything so far has been preference-based, and these switches were one of the two items I called out at the beginning of the video as being a major issue. For that, we have to talk about them getting stuck. This is a challenging thing to report on because I can't readily recreate what I've run into, but essentially I've had numerous occasions where I've pressed a key, it seemingly returns back to its original position, but the key still registers as being pressed. This has happened on at least 5 occasions to at least 3 different keys. The most annoying version of this issue came when I was editing, and it came with the spacebar specifically. The result was that my video kept bouncing between play and pause over and over and over again. Anytime that this issue has happened, the solution has simply been to press the key once, and it's always resolved itself. I've examined the switches to see if anything seems off with the ones that have been getting stuck, but there hasn't been anything that I've noticed wrong with the switches. This could be a fluke on my board. It could be something that gets resolved over time as the factory lubing on the switches works its way through more of the switch with more use. Or it could be some other design flaw that I just haven't been able to figure out yet. Either way, it's a bit annoying and is a concerning consideration around the typing experience. If you've experienced issues like this, please note it in the comments so that others can see how pervasive this issue is. Overall, I'm happy with the typing experience here. In a vacuum, it's a nice, quiet experience that I like. Assuming those sticking issues don't persist, it's totally usable. When comparing side by side though, I think that the Max version typing experience is better, as are many competitors out there, perhaps most notably the Newfie Air. Now jumping from one major issue to the other, let's talk about the connectivity. Now first of all, Keychron is notorious for having Bluetooth issues. It doesn't take long searching Google or Reddit to find lots of discussions over the years with people experiencing numerous types of issues. With the Max lineup, they finally delivered a 2.4 gig USB receiver to allow users a wireless option that doesn't rely on Bluetooth. On the K3 V3, they unfortunately did not include this, so you're stuck with either wired operation or Bluetooth. Now to discuss the connectivity issues, I want to dive into the topic in 2 parts: sleep to wake and other issues. Starting with sleep to wake, this is the main issue that I've experienced in the past. The K3 V2 automatically went to sleep after just 10 minutes of inactivity. From there, it took an unreasonably long amount of time to wake back up. I covered this in my review of that board. Since then, I've learned that you can adjust this, either turning auto sleep off altogether, which is probably not great for your battery life unless you're really diligent about turning your board off when you step away, or you can change the auto sleep to 10, 20, or 30 minutes, giving some relief from this issue. In this instance, even if the board is very slow to wake up, at least it doesn't go to sleep quite as quickly. While I can't guarantee it, I assume that most people that have Bluetooth connectivity complaints, which say that it resolves after a short time, are probably just having the board go to sleep. The good news is that this is much less of an issue with the K3 Max and K3 V3 in my testing. By default, they do not go to sleep nearly as quickly, and they seem to wake up quicker as well. They're not instantaneously available like some boards appear to be. I think the Logitech MX Keys is probably the best example of that. It somehow always seems ready to go, no matter how long you're away. That brings us to the other issues. Many people report on Keychron keyboards disconnecting completely and requiring various solutions to work again. This could include resetting Bluetooth on your device, power cycling the keyboard, or some other solution. This wasn't something I'd ever experienced firsthand until this keyboard. I ran into numerous occasions where this keyboard completely stopped working in the middle of use. It felt like the battery had died altogether. It was completely unresponsive. In my case, the solution was just to turn the keyboard off and back on, at which point it would immediately repair and work as if nothing had ever happened.
Here's one of the issues that I've been running into. Absolutely nothing happening on my edit screen there, trying to pause or unpause. Power is on, and if I check the computer and go to Bluetooth, you can see I am connected. So we're connected, we're powered on, nothing is happening. If I flip it off and back on, it will reconnect, and it works totally fine. Not sure what's going on.
This is incredibly frustrating to experience. Thankfully, it only happened to me a handful of times in testing, but if it became a regular occurrence, it would make this keyboard completely unusable. So that's my other major issue. As much as I've been excited to think that Keychron's Bluetooth issues were all but resolved due to the sleep to wake issue being minimized, it seems like something is still going on and we may still have full disconnecting issues that are present. I have no idea how pervasive this issue is. If you've got experiences yourself, please feel free to share them below to help aggregate any common experiences for other viewers. For other functionality and features, we have another very positive change with the version 3, which is the introduction of QMK compatibility. This means that you can fully customize your keyboard, including the use of macros. This works with Keychron's Launcher web app, which is very easy to use, and gives you the ability to make changes to the layout, the backlighting, and update firmware, all in one convenient application with no downloads needed. So that means it's good on Windows or on Mac. Backlighting remains the same as other Keychron models. You can purchase a full RGB version or a white backlight version, depending on your preference. There's a ton of light modes and options which can be adjusted with the dedicated RGB key in the top corner and with a few other key commands to get a little bit more granular. Polling rates for the board are 1000 Hz over a wired connection and 90 Hz over Bluetooth. You can use the keyboard with Mac or Windows and can switch modes using a switch on the back. They also continue to provide both Mac and Windows keycaps in the box. Charging and wired connections are done via the USB-C port on the back, and the included cable is a decent quality braided cable that's about 4 feet long. The battery remains a rather small 1550 milliamp hour size. However, even though it's the same battery size, Keychron is advertising way more battery life on the version 3 than on the K3 Max. The version 3 quotes 124 hours with backlighting off and 82 hours with it on, compared to 73 hours with it off and 42 hours with it on for the Max. I don't know precisely why this change would have happened, but my best guess is that the MCU, or the chip that's used in the version 3, consumes significantly less power. It is specifically labeled in their documentation as low power, which may be our clue as to how they've virtually doubled the battery life on the same size battery. I've historically criticized Keychron for being behind the pack in terms of their battery size, but if they can up their efficiency like this, then they may not need a bigger battery to get just as good a support for battery life. The K3 version 3 starts at just $84 for white backlighting only. It's $94 to add RGB and $104 to get RGB and hot-swappable switches. This is the same pricing as the version 2 used to occupy, and it's $10 less than the more premium Max model. In any instance, expect to pay an additional $10 or so for shipping, depending on where you are in the world, which, if you order on a marketplace like Amazon, will often just be built directly into the price. So is it worth it? Well, for $10 more, you can get the Max model, which gets you authentic Gateron switches rather than the Keychron ones. It adds that 2.4 gig USB receiver, which includes 1000 Hz polling and does away with the Bluetooth issues that plague so many people. You get the lighter color keycaps and non-shine-through keycaps, which may be better or worse to you depending on your preference, but they're PBT plastic, which is objectively better. So at full price, the Max sure seems worth the premium to me. Let's recap the full differentiators and dealbreakers though, to make sure you remember everything we've discussed about the version 3. From a differentiator perspective, this is the same great design that Keychron has been using for years. It's unbelievably thin and small, and now has the same great keycap shape found on the Max. There's customization options for both backlighting and hot-swappable switches, which allows you to either save money or spend more depending on what you value. There's shine-through on the keycaps, which isn't available on the Max version. The typing is very quiet, and the battery life is impressively long for the size of the battery. From a deal breaker perspective, the Keychron switches had issues as I experienced sticking keys and an overall feel that was stiffer and scratchier than I would have liked. The Bluetooth connection disconnected several times and required a power cycle to resolve. Finally, there's no 2.4 gig receiver, so unless you like to use your keyboard wired, you may be stuck with some Bluetooth issues. There's not a lot of deal breakers for this keyboard, but they're pretty big ones. In the end, although I do like it, I would definitely recommend opting for the Max version instead. The trade-offs just don't make sense for the $10 savings. You should get the Max unless you can get one of these discounted by far more than $10, or if you're on a really strict budget and are okay with the potential deal breakers that I've outlined. And for Keychron, please figure out what's going on with the Bluetooth and fix it once and for all, and keep honing those Keychron switches before you decide to roll them out any further. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you appreciate in-depth looks at keyboards like this, navigate down to that like button and help spread the love. Appreciate you all. I'll see you in the next one.